right, Henry Herndon, consultant, here to discuss community power. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire as one option in comparison to some of the brokers in the market. In the sort of four categories, I'll walk through our governance, economy of scale, portfolio management, and public advocacy. So the governance structure of Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, CPCNH, or the coalition, it was incorporated on October 1st, so 13 days ago. 14 cities and towns executed this joint powers agreement that you have here, and filed their articles of incorporation and hosted the first board meeting and elected a chair and a vice chair and an executive committee. The board of that organization, there are 14 city and town members, or 13 cities and towns, plus one county. Each of them appoints one county, correct, Cheshire County. Each of them appoints a director and an alternate to that board of directors. So the new nonprofit corporation is controlled by its member cities and towns. So there's a governance, accountability, nonprofit aspect to it, and that lends to the transparency of, okay, how are we going to go about procuring power in the market? Are we going to lift the hood up on what's actually happening here and make sure we're getting a good deal and lend transparency to that? So that's one piece. And so there's that board of directors level, and their next step very shortly will be to have sort of the operations and management. They'll put out a request for proposals to hire companies, perhaps some of the other energy consultants and brokers that are in the market might perform some services, but hire companies to manage procurement, to manage electricity procurement on their behalf. So that's one piece. I think the second thing I said is economies of scale. So those 14 cities and towns represent 13% of the state population-wise, and they're the electricity in those communities is larger than the electric load of Liberty Utilities, I believe. So one of the three investor-owned utilities. So substantial buying power. I think it's approximately 500,000 megawatt hours, which doesn't mean a whole lot to us all, but 13% of the state. And then this portfolio management piece, this is key. So a typical energy broker says, let me get you a contract for power for 12 months or 24 months. And at the end of that 12 months or 24 months, I'll come back and I'll sell you another 12 or 24 months. And it's just sort of a one contract at one price on a cycle like that. When you're at a scale of buying, this much electricity, it is more prudent to have a portfolio of energy resources, different contracts with different generators and different suppliers. Some short-term contracts in the market with energy suppliers, maybe one 15-year power purchase agreement with a local solar array to buy some of their power, and you blend and you mix that power together into a portfolio, and you actively manage it. So that lowers your risk and lowers your costs, and it provides other benefits. It allows you to really accrue a reserve fund as well. Mm-hmm. And then the final piece is really public advocacy. The coalition is thinking very much about how do we, clear away some of the regulatory barriers that we see at the state level to enable communities to develop more local energy resources, do more innovation, partner with utilities to modernize the grid, because there's a lot more that could be done, and there's sort of a leadership gap. So there's potential for these communities to play a more of a leadership role in state policy issues. So those are a couple of the points I would highlight. And just this right here, this is the joint powers agreement. If a town wanted to join the coalition, they would want to review this agreement. It's a contract among the municipalities. It has the bylaws of this new corporation. And it outlines all the details of how the organization will function. There's no cost to joining. Community can withdraw at any time.
That was my next question. So like if Webster joined now, but then we see that we might be able to get some deal or
right.
the solar panels, we can just say we're out.
Doesn't obligate you to anything.
Okay.
Although the other sort of reason I think that I'm here is because if you wanted to buy power from that solar array for all of the residents and businesses in Warner, That's
Webster,
excuse me, Webster. That's exactly what the coalition is designed to do, is to manage a portfolio of energy contracts, including maybe a contract from this wholesale solar array, and buy that power on behalf of the member communities who want it. So if Webster's a member and they say, hey, coalition, go get us a supply rate and have one of your suppliers be that solar array, then the coalition can negotiate with that developer on your behalf.
And so the deals that you're looking at could be, since you're saying there's a portfolio, so you'd only mix in like, I don't know, 25% of it for the solar panels and, 10% from, I don't know, but anyway, you mix them up.
Yes.
Trying to get the best deal or is it necessarily the best deal, or are you looking for, the renewable stuff?
These are good questions. And I guess to be clear, I am not going to be negotiating energy contracts on anyone's behalf. I won't be managing that portfolio. I have just supported the creation of the coalition, and I'm sort of working to support the members move through the town meeting process where they approve a community power program. The coalition is going to RFP for companies that do participate day in, day out, week after week, month after month in energy markets. And the respondents to that and whoever's selected, they will work to put together that portfolio on behalf of the members.
And obviously, since just starting out, but are they saying that we, whatever, let's say Cheshire County, right, we just want renewable? Or is Cheshire saying we just want the cheapest?
There are members that want both. Some are very motivated by renewable energy, some are motivated by purely saving costs, and it's not one big purchase for everyone. It's a service provider to meet the goals and policies of the different members, and the members can have distinct distinct rates, distinct renewable energy content. All that is controlled by each individual member.
Oh, so this is not everybody there. The 14 communities.
They don't all have the same product.
Okay.
They can design their own product.
Okay.
Speaking of the different kinds of power, of course, there's how is the purchase actually done? Because there's times of day that, of course, power is worth more on the grid versus the way that we typically see it as just a kilowatt hour on home meters. At what level is the coalition exposed to that versus not having to deal with that because they're really just all going through the same grid?
It's a really good question. And there's a lot of pieces to that. So the coalition and its service providers, someone is a load serving entity. That means they're registered in the wholesale market, they're exposed to real-time prices, and they hedge their load, and maybe they hedge 90% or 95% of their load, and that's all tied up in contracts. And then 5% is whatever the real-time price is, something like that. So there will be a portfolio manager managing that wholesale risk on behalf of the coalition. They're exposed to that risk, and risk management is the name of the game, and you don't want a lot of market exposure. Mostly you've hedged everything, and you're not really, prices spike, it's not going to turn you upside down. The other thing you're highlighting is the time of day piece.
Yes.
What the coalition wants to do is empower residents and businesses and customers to, if they would choose to, benefit from more exposure to time-based rates. So you could have a solar array, solar plus storage, that gets paid more for net metering at 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m., because prices are higher than, if they happen to be higher than on hot summer days. And so like one example I like to share, you could put 500 batteries in 500 homes. At the nighttime, demand is low, prices are low. You soak up electricity from the grid at cheap prices. And then in the late afternoon, on a hot summer day, you put that energy back on the grid at high prices. You can design programs that
give those opportunities to customers, whether it's solar, storage, behavior. This is like a longer down the line thing we're moving towards.
This is your smart grid stuff.
Yes, and that is the long game. That's not going to happen on day one with the coalition, but that's a large part of why the coalition is being created, to achieve that.
If a particular town joins this coalition, does that mean everybody in town is drawing electricity via that route?
Yes. So if you would develop a plan as a committee, and the coalition has a template you could use. That plan would have to be approved by the select board to go to town meeting in a warrant. If the town voted for the plan, once you chose to launch a program, you said, "Oh, the price is right, we want to launch," you automatically enroll all customers who are getting the utility power. So if you're on default utility supply, you're enrolled. If you have a supply contract, it doesn't affect you.
What effect would, if any, would come to bear on those of us who already have solar panels and are feeding power back into the grid at retail rates?
You would keep your same program. If you're on old net metering, it may be that so there's something I have to check for you, is do you have to go back to utility power? If you're on new net metering, you get the same exact deal from community power, or you can if you want to design it that way.
I'm not sure what the difference between old and new net meter is.
In 2017, you got a better deal. Before like September 2017, you got a better deal.
Okay.
You installed your solar panels after
Which we
that.
have.
You get
I
a
have
worse
that,
deal.
Jeremy has that, yeah.
But the other thing the coalition wants to do is empower more innovative net metering things. So that's some of that time of use stuff. The other thing I just don't want to miss is you automatically enroll all residents and businesses, and anyone can opt out at any time. You get a mailer that says, "Welcome to Webster Community Power," with whatever you want to tell them. Here's your default. If you want to opt out, check this box. If you want to pay extra for 100% green, check that box. You can have some options in there.
Obviously, time of use is interesting to us, as we have a municipal solar array as well. And that could also help, for example, with our public safety building that has high demand charges, that those often happen evening, overnight type of hours for calls and that sort of thing. So we're definitely interested in that aspect of things. I'm not sure how well that would go over with the general population of Webster, though, being that most of them are fairly used to what they have and don't really care, don't necessarily like change. So being able to say that we're not going to change anything other than we're going to get you the cheapest rates possible, unless you check this box that says I want everything green. It seems like probably the way that would make the most sense for Webster. To me, I mean, maybe you've got different opinions there, but that seems like that's probably the most straightforward. And is there? So we have two kind of gotchas for the time of use thing. One is, of course, we have two different power providers in town. Half of the town is Eversource, half of the town is Unitil.
Interesting.
And we know that, like, okay, it's default, so it's not really going to matter whether we're taking from them or them. It's you're changing an energy provider and they can deal with it.
Some of us have two different power companies on the same piece of property.
Yeah, but the second part of that is that I know that neither of them have been working towards or wanting to do anything with time of use metering, especially Eversource, who has come out and told, can't remember if it's the PUC or the New Hampshire, the new energy, I can't remember what the exact, what Department of Energy. But they basically came out and said, well, you're not moving fast on this stuff, so we're not going to devote any of this to New Hampshire. We're only doing this in Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island.
I thought I heard that the New Hampshire, the ones up north.
The electric co-op?
Yes,
The co-op is doing that.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
They are certainly the most innovative of the utility in the state. But yeah, that's all.
Which obviously doesn't affect
It's all
us.
accurate.
You know.
So how do we look at all of that? How does that affect the way that we can participate? And is it like a one-off, like I want to do time of use, I check the thing off and then,
So the way you described it is exactly right. You would not want to enroll people in a time of use program without their consent. So everyone would automatically get in the Webster Community Power default, which is hopefully a little cheaper than the Eversource and the Unitil rate, and maybe a little greener if you want to do that. Maybe you don't. Then maybe down the line, for people who have solar or people who want to participate in this new battery program, those people could choose to have the time of use rate. But you don't want to, exactly as you said, you don't want to put a time of use rate on anyone without them understanding it and wanting to participate. So there's an opportunity through community power to engage the community and do more education, whether that's through your billing or whatever your customer communications are. And that's a longer term evolution of, there's these new products that can save you money. Large energy users do this all the time, where they go on a time-based rate, or they manage their demand a little bit. So those kinds of products can come through the evolution of the program.
and so as a typical homeowners, of course, currently do not have time of use metering. And the meters are owned and managed by the utilities, who have basically said they're not doing that. So if someone, and to go back to your battery program too, I actually contacted Eversource, who is my supplier, asked them directly, I know that you run these programs in the other states. Can I do that here? You've run a pilot program in the past. And their response was, we're not allowed to do that because the PUC in New Hampshire said we can't.
Right.
So is that something that you would be stuck with as the coalition, or is it different because you would have different signals than the power company for being able to do the batteries, or how does this all work out?
That's a great question. A couple of things. In the statute, RSA 53E, there's a provision that says a community power program may implement its own metering infrastructure, subject to these regulatory provisions. Like if you go through a regulated process of the Public Utility Commission, you can either buy new meters, enter into an agreement where the utility invests in new meters, or co-own and share in the cost of the new meters. So that's another down the line. You can, through what is likely arduous regulatory process, get more control over upgrading the meters. The other angle here is, you're right, utilities they're slow to evolve. They haven't been forward thinking on smart meters.
In New Hampshire.
In New Hampshire. But it kind of comes back to the public advocacy pieces. Having a coalition that not only can procure your electricity for you, build up a healthy reserve fund and be financially robust. So this organization is going to broker for the power and take a small margin off of all of the energy sales and all of the communities to pay for its own operations, and to accrue a reserve fund, protect against changes in the market, be able to leverage investors, things like that. So anyway, you have this new organization that's purchasing your electricity and is equipped with the expertise and the capacity to engage at the Public Utility Commission and engage at the legislature and hopefully build partnerships with these utility companies, because now we're on a scale of Liberty or Unitil, and then hopefully growing much faster than that. And an entity that can actually, rather than one small town of 2,500 people in New Hampshire trying to get Eversource to move, you have a coalition of communities that is more equipped to engage effectively there.
Mm-hmm. Especially if you go down the road of starting to own meters, but obviously that's not to start with. How does the relationship between the community power and the coalition actually work with the providers like your Unitil or your Eversource? Because obviously they're still charging us for delivery and everything else to maintain their lines, etc. But aren't they likely to care less about communities that they're not completely serving?
I wouldn't say that. The way the relationship will work is the utility sends the bill for most people, and on the bill it says Eversource delivery charges for poles and wires. And then it says Eversource default energy supply rate, and that's for the energy supply. That'll get swapped out, and that'll now say Webster Community Power Energy Supply on the Eversource bill. And there's, in the background, if you start launch a program, the utility shares all the customer data, meter information and other things with the community power aggregator and their service providers. So there's data sharing going on there. The utility earns all its money from delivery from poles and wires. They're still going to get paid for that. It doesn't matter to them where the supply comes from. So it doesn't affect them financially.
I'm thinking that basically they make money even on the supply.
They really
Right.
don't.
Really?
There's compensated for the administrative charge, like for their
Like,
administration of.
like whatever, 10th of a cent.
They have to
So,
put out an RFP, and they pick the lowest energy supplier for 6 months of power. They don't care where that comes. They just buy it at 7 and sell it to you at 7. It doesn't matter to them. On the excuse me, on the metering and billing question, more radical thinkers would say that in order to really get to that smart grid type of place, you have to take billing and metering functions away from the utility and give them to a marketplace or give them to a community power type of thing. Because if you want to educate customers and engage them, data collection at the meter point and the billing mechanisms, like those need to be upgraded. Those need to be made modern. The utility has clearly not done that. But that's perhaps a more radical perspective that I wouldn't necessarily say in front of utility folks.
That session that you were moderating, the one on data, that was amazing. Yeah, and is it going to? Well, who knows when it will come to New
Right.
Hampshire.
We're really, really far behind in terms of using modern data and
Yeah.
technology.
Why are we so far behind? Is it just the company thinks, New Hampshire's not much of a state, so forget it, we'll just do what we're gonna do? Or is it these companies?
Well, apparently it's also the PUC.
It's a product of a regulated monopoly culture. So you have a company, Eversource, Unitil, and 100 years ago, the state said, you get a monopoly. No one can compete with you. You own all the grid. In exchange for that, we're going to regulate you. And we're going to set your prices. So you've got this like state-regulated, controlled utility monopoly that is the culture is to not innovate and to not change and to
Well, I know they don't, for being a public utilities commission, they never seem to help the public. So that's,
They largely, yeah.
so the bottom line, because I remember I called them for something too, and they were about as useless can be.
And it creates sort of like a utility says, oh, the regulators won't let us do it. And the regulators say, oh, the utility won't do it. And it's like,
Yeah,
no
right.
one's responsible anymore because the utility can always blame the regulators and the regulators can always blame the utility. So that's, and again, like, we need leadership in the state.
And part of that also goes down to legislation as well. And so, for example, like I said with Eversource, the reason that they want to do all of this stuff in Massachusetts is because Massachusetts has legislated these are the programs that have to be put into place. We need this by X date. That's our target. And, you need to do that. And if you're not doing these sorts of programs, there are fines and other levies involved for whether it's, carbon offset stuff that people have talked about in different places, or you're not using enough green power, etc. And we've, in New Hampshire, generally avoided that. And so the companies have basically said, well, we already did our innovation by switching to the most green fossil fuels we have, which is natural gas. And we, as New Hampshire, did a really good job with getting away from the worst fossil fuels. But now the typical grid production for ISO New England as a whole is somewhere around 70 to 75% natural gas. So now we're stuck on that, and the only way you get better from there is to go towards renewable stuff. And or saying, well, we're going to shave peaks so we don't need to run things as much. And so now you're getting into that data technology stuff that you need, which, of course, even legislatures who think they know about it don't. So
Oh, yeah. That I believe, and I'm sure that companies are not too happy with doing this stuff either. The gas company doesn't want to lose their business, and so. But legislatures. I think it's way too big, and they don't pay attention to half the stuff. They're legislators, so unlike selectmen, they get beat up for everything.
So there's a little of all of that involved as to why New Hampshire is where it is, and the other groups that do a lot of, like Revision and others that do lots of advocacy towards solar and other renewable energies. The common phrasing going around now is New Hampshire is the donut hole of renewable energy in New England.
Really?
Yeah. We did a lot early and then just kind of stopped. So.
Need some good PR, I could see that.
So Henry, do you know of any towns that are just going without a coalition?
Yes. So the city of Keene has signed up with a different firm, and they finished their plan and they submitted it to the Public Utility Commission. And there's a couple of other towns, perhaps in the state, that are considering or doing the same.
I imagine these are pretty big towns. I mean, obviously Keene's a city.
Say. Yeah.
You know. I'm just thinking, I mean, like, what can a town like this with less than 2,000 people, would it make sense for us to just go on our own?
It's not my recommendation, but
right.
Another thing I want to be clear about, no towns have done this yet, because the Public Utility Commission still needs to do regulatory rules that will say, hey, utility companies, here how you share data, and a couple of other details. So that should unfold over the next 6 months, and the initial programs should launch in 2022. But anyway.
And so you're assuming that, like, if we can, well, first of all, when the solar panel, when Olivewood, actually it's not Olivewood, what's the name of the?
Well, Olivewood's the developer, but
yeah.
it's Deer Meadow Solar is the
Right.
working name of it.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway,
It's got a nice ring.
Yeah.
Good branding on their part.
well, it's Deer Meadow Road.
The name of it. Okay,
Right.
nice.
Yeah. So you're saying, I'm assuming that we can't really get a deal with this Deer Meadow because it's going to be, they're not actually going to be selling the power to us.
When are they going to break ground and build the thing?
Currently, they're hoping that early this coming year we will see more civil engineering plans, and then the early to mid next year they'll be submitting the SEC application, and they're hoping 2023 groundbreaking, completed by 2024.
So
or in early 2024.
that timing is actually quite good if you wanted to do community power, I think. So, I mean, we're getting close-ish to the time where you need to know what's going on the warrant next March, right? So if you wanted to now quickly develop a community power plan and bring it to town meeting, you could have a program approved in 2022 and launch that program and build into that. We want to contract to buy some of that solar power when it's ready to go. You could maybe even do that 2023, it sounds like, by the pace they're going at. The other thing, it's like the coalition today is not equipped to go out and broker and contract for power. I think I said this already, but there's still like the enlist the management, the operations side of that organization. So that has to happen too.
When is all that expecting to be kind of mostly in place and ready to go?
The initial communities hope to launch programs in spring, summer of next year.
And so spring and summer is a perfect time to then lead us into, we have a municipal solar array across the street from the town hall here. It currently sits on 2 different meters that are attached to Unitil. Each are like, it's 4 rows.
You remember
in
this,
each
Henry, remember I was telling you about this, that's how I got involved with Henry.
I don't know if there was the problem with your competitive energy supplier and your broker, or with the demand charges.
It's with the problem is that we have to, everything has to go into the grid. Nothing is coming here.
Nothing is behind the meter. It's all its own meter. There's no behind the meter.
Gotcha.
So there are 2 behind the meters with no loads.
Gotcha.
Which is why we end up with the demand charges and extra meter charges
Right.
and so on. But of course, looking at that, how does that tie into working with either currently it's all default power goes to Unitil and they send us a check each month for the amount of power that goes out of it, versus doing that with, say, the coalition? Is that something that would make sense to switch over towards the coalition, or would it be better for us to opt those out and be making money off of Unitil while trying to save money for everybody? Like, how does that all
Right.
work?
So the coalition is only responsible for the energy supply portion of the net metering for that. So those are less than 100 kilowatts.
Yes,
So you're getting compensated, like you get all the energy supply.
they're close to 10 kilowatts each.
Okay, gotcha. And then you get paid for all of your energy supply, and then you get some fraction of the delivery charge, or something like that. So if we did community power, those could be enrolled in community power and get the exact same deal. Or if there's potential to have more lucrative net metering rates through the coalition. I can't say it's specifically today like what that might look like, but if you're generating power locally, that can shave peak, that can offset the need to buy this wholesale power and to get power from transmission and things like that. So it is possible that you could design a net metering product that is more lucrative and more attractive than your current net metering product.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still, basically the problem we had was that we basically we weren't lied to.
They were misled.
Right.
By the solar company?
Yes, by Granite State Solar.
Okay.
You know, and
That's unfortunate. Yeah.
well, what probably happened was the guy who sold us on this is his first municipal. You know,
The short version is everything would have worked out like people expected if it had been a residence
right.
and everything was behind one meter.
Okay.
But since it's not, and it's multi-meters and group metering, then we have things like demand charges that don't get offset.
Right. Yeah. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, and because actually we generate enough power that would have covered, every one of the town buildings.
Right.
Last year we generated 117% of the power that the municipality used as its own ownership.
And did you purchase it outright? Did you finance it?
Yeah.
We finished paying
right.
off the financing last year, so now we completely own it outright.
Okay. So it's still a moneymaker. It's just not as much of a moneymaker
Right.
as you would have hoped.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And
good. That's good.
Unfortunately, the town is still paying electric bills.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you have some revenue coming in here, and then you are paying electric bills.
Yeah,
Right.
we pay our electric bills as normal, and then we get a check from that each month.
Right.
And I think last time we figured it was something like it paid either 40 or 60% of it. I think it was about 45% of the bill it paid with its revenue, but despite producing 117% of the power, but that's in large part almost all of what was missing is demand charges.
Gotcha. Yeah, another thing the coalition is looking at is, demand charges. There are companies out there that go in and help, how do we address your demand charge? What's causing the demand charge? Let's do an analysis, and then let's address that and try to smooth it out. Sometimes you can't, but that's a potential option. That's something that, again, as the coalition becomes more robust, okay, there are these firms that we know are very equipped to provide those kinds of services, and we share those across the members.
Of course, the demand and peak shaving and everything goes back to your battery concept. When dealing with that sort of thing, and I want to say it's Connected Grid is the name that was being used.
Connected Solutions.
Yes, yeah. How available to the coalition is that if the power company itself isn't doing it? Like, can the coalition say, we're going to do this as the supplier, even though the, say, Eversource or Unitil aren't in New Hampshire?
To an extent, data and information permitting. So that's the other piece of, you need more data, you need smarter meters, you need some of that infrastructure to enable the things you're talking about. So yes, you can, but again, there's sort of like you have to clear away some regulations to really maximize that.
Okay.
One example is like if you have sub 5 megawatts, if you have a 4 megawatt generator here plugged in the distribution grid that generates at the time of the monthly transmission peak. Each month there's a peak on the transmission grid.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a local generator, it is reducing your transmission costs. It's reducing the need to have an interstate high voltage transmission network that's shipping power in from out of state. Right now, that doesn't actually reduce your transmission costs because the regulations aren't designed the right way. So there's legislation coming up this session likely that will enable that sort of mid-sized community scale generation to actually be compensated for this service. It's reducing transmission costs, and it should be compensated for that.
So, speaking of the transmission costs and keeping it local, that was one of the things that originally wanted to be done with our larger array, but they were told they couldn't use the local distribution lines for putting the power out. So they have to tie, this is the Olivewood project or Deer Meadow Solar. So they have to tie into the high power lines that are north-south that are, it's not the same line, but it's the same corridor as, Quebec Hydro and all of the others that are going down. And so those don't actually terminate in New Hampshire, they terminate in Massachusetts. So if we're going down the transmission type, that would actually appear to be not good for us then if we're trying to broker into a deal with them. Or is the actual transmission not considered and it's really more about on-paper transmission?
Well, I'm not sure I understand your question, but there is some funny business with on-paper transmission. Like a lot of the utility stuff is like, well, on paper, contract, where do the electrons actually go?
Yeah.
So there's like a disconnect between the physics of where electrons go
Correct.
And how
Because the
contracts and
physics says
accounting work.
anything from there can't get here until it goes through Massachusetts.
So is that the case with this transmission line? I don't understand like the topography and how the transmission line, where it interconnects and where it is pouring power into the distribution. I don't have that level of detailed understanding.
This particular north-south line is basically up at the Quebec border and then down into Massachusetts.
Okay.
We don't actually use the power on the line.
Okay,
It goes to ISO New England, but it doesn't actually stop in New
Interesting.
Hampshire.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking, remember the whole issue, right, about, nobody wanted to, well, not nobody, but remember they wanted to.
Oh, the Northern Pass.
Right, the Northern Pass, right, and of course that was because they said the power would be going from Quebec to Massachusetts or Connecticut, but it wasn't going to stop here,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we're talking about the same thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this.
But again, it's, you can, wherever those electrons from that Deer Meadow Solar go
Mhm.
is different from who's buying the power.
Right.
So
And so that's how I was asking about your
Yeah.
transmission piece. Is that a on paper transmission,
Mhm.
because, well, it's New Hampshire to New Hampshire, or is that a physically where the lines go transmission?
So what we're trying to do is align the physics with the paper. Because right now, physics happens and you build local solar and physically you reduce load on the transmission grid and you reduce cost on the transmission grid. And on paper, you don't. On paper, the transmission costs keep going up because they're not accounting for that load reduction. And that's what the policy needs to align the physics with the paper, if that makes sense.
So that sounds like it would actually be bad for us to buy from Deer Meadow Solar, since the physics say it can't go local.
So what's bad for you is what raises your costs, and what's good for you is what lowers your costs, right? So if you can on paper buy that power and get better prices, you should do that, regardless of if
Right.
it's
In other
going.
words,
Yeah.
in other words, because we've been, I guess we kind of floated that a little bit, you know,
Yeah.
asking, can we get a better deal because this is from our town,
Right.
you know?
So again, yeah, I'm talking specific. There's a specific gap of 1 to 5 megawatts. You're at 75 megawatts. You're big.
Theirs
wholesale.
are, yeah.
Yeah, they're. So the 1 to 5 megawatt spot is like sub what needs to be registered in the wholesale market and what can be in this like local in-state market that's reducing wholesale costs.
Okay.
So that's a gap that it's sort of a specific gap. It doesn't necessarily apply to the 75 megawatts.
So that what would be more interesting in the community power portion for us as a town then would be if, for example, we were installing another array that, you know, would be another 20, 30, 40 kilowatts or something.
Or even larger, because you could 2,500 people in town.
Mhm.
You could probably
Less than 2,000.
less than 2,000. Okay. Yeah, I mean, you could. I don't know what scale that is, but maybe in the megawatt range of an array. But again, there's like the coalition is going to be looking at developing solar in different places around the state, and any member can buy into any one of those projects.
Mhm.
To what extent is all of this dependent on legislative support? I'm trying to have the back of my mind the thoughts of the governor who has not been overly enthusiastic about some of the things that the energy people would like to do.
So there's a great deal we can do under current legislation, and there's a good amount of progress that's happened in 2019 in this past legislative session. And we can go and do community power, and we can do a lot of good with it. There is more to be done in terms of legislation. So I don't want to make it seem like we're stuck in the mud, because we're not. I'll also say that community power specifically has broad bipartisan support. This legislative session in the Republican-controlled House, Senate, and Governor's office, there was a bill passed that was strong compromise. The coalition was very involved in turning around a really bad bill that came from Eversource and making it a compromise that was good for community power, and we did that with Republican leadership throughout the legislature.
Broad bipartisan report, what a concept.
It exists for community power. So Chairman Michael Vose of the Science, Technology, and Energy Committee, who's pretty anti anything to do with climate change or renewable energy subsidies, has been quite supportive of community power.
So Eversource is putting in their own bills to try to save their little butts, huh? Big butts.
They like to meddle around
Yeah,
down at the State
yeah.
House.
And nobody knows about it until the last minute. I mean, the normal people would not know
Right.
about it until the last minute.
And again, we hope to, and we sort of the coalition demonstrated an ability to have a say at the State House up against Eversource just this past session, and that is something that they propose to really expand upon, is, not get run over by
Yeah.
the utility backdoor dealings over there.
So how big is Eversource now? I mean, they're based in Connecticut, right?
They're the largest company in New England.
Yeah, right, because obviously they picked up PSNH,
Yeah,
they
they're
were in bankruptcy, right?
they're
Oh.
based in Connecticut. I think it's 5 utilities. They own like a Connecticut utility, 3 Massachusetts utilities, and
Yeah.
PSNH.
Yeah, because I was kind of shocked when I was watching, a Red Sox game and said
I thought
Eversource.
I thought they did a Rhode Island one too.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
But anyway, so they're the largest
Mhm.
in New England.
I think, yeah, not only the largest utility, I think they're like I don't know, yeah, they're the largest utility. For sure.
Most expensive too. My friends in Connecticut hate them too, just like I do. So,
Yeah,
price wise, because they don't give anybody a break. But
But I will say, renewable wise, they're way easier to deal with than Unitil.
really, well, see, I don't know. You're the expert in that. So
so do you imagine the select board would want to consider membership with the group, the coalition?
You're talking to two of
There's
them.
two of
So
us.
there's two of three?
So
There's only
we
three,
can't, we
right.
can't discuss as select board, but what I
Gotcha.
can say is that the select board did at a previous time, and I don't remember exactly when, appoint the energy committee to following, all of the random stuff that we needed to legislatively to say, the energy committee is gonna be in charge of this and figuring it out and setting it up for us.
Mhm.
So I'm sure the select board still will need to sign off on everything,
Right.
but it's not the select board doing it, it's the energy committee.
Gotcha.
So, the one thing, if we put something on the ballot or for town meeting on the warrant, even can we do something? Well, in March, even though we don't have So if we don't move on to it, if we're unable to move on to it this in 2022, would it still hold over? Could we do a warrant article that would hold over till 2023?
You could. So the warrant article authorizes the select board to say, yes, we want to do community power when we're ready and when the price is right. So you go to town meeting in 2022, and then you don't have to do a program then. You don't ever have to do one, but now you have the
But you
authority.
have the permission,
You have
right?
the permission
right.
to do it when it's ready.
I'd rather be ahead of the game than behind it. So.
Right.
In other words, then we would be, leave it up to the energy committee,
To
rather than the select board, right? Or,
Well, the select board would, so, correct me if I'm wrong here, it sounds like the warrant article would have to be written to give the select board the authority to do this. And the select board has already given the energy committee the authority to get involved and figure all of this out on behalf of the town. So once that happens, then the energy committee would present to the select board who would okay it.
Yes.
but this is all depending on if everything is passed by the.
Well, and we actually
Town
find
meeting.
things that everybody wants. Yeah.
But at least if we get a vote of the town that they're behind this, we're not going to just roll our wheels for nothing. So.
And to be clear, the warrant article is to say, does the town approve the plan that has been developed by the committee? So you have to do an electric aggregation plan, a community power plan. That plan is what the warrant article is authorizing.
Okay.
So there's a step where, and we have a template, we can give you the template and say, here's the template, fill in the gaps. But the warrant article is referencing a plan that has been developed.
Oh, okay, it has to reference a plan, it just doesn't give us carte blanche.
No, it approves a plan that lays out the
okay.
details.
So I think it would make sense for the energy committee to be working on this. I don't think it
We're not
makes
gonna,
sense to
right,
present
we
it
can't,
for this
right,
year.
we can't have a plan by March.
But with the
It's a tight
combination,
squeeze, yeah.
with the combination of a template and going through things, I think we could have a good idea by town meeting so that we can mention it and tell people this will be coming next year.
At least plant the idea.
Right. Like, we want to do this. This has already been, on the energy committee's plate as, assigned by the select board. Expect to hear more about this at next year's meeting to save you rates, sort of thing.
Makes sense.
And then it's also not the same year that everyone is trying to, like, we're going to have to do PR and tell people and education so that people know what it is.
Right.
And there's another thing going on this year that's involving a lot of, in theory. So, of course, our wetlands ordinance that the Conservation Commission has been pushing. So,
You mentioned the challenge of resistance to change. We certainly will face that.
oh yes, but that's one of the reasons why giving it time to get the information out and then actually provide people information and real source will be really
Remember, we were able to sell those, our panels out there.
But I think
And that
the whole thing is people will save money, and that's, for something like this, and that's a little easier to sell than some other things, but if you
You're right,
could,
we were able to sell it, but we had to do a little
That's right.
backing and filling when it didn't pay
well.
off to the extent that we said they would.
Right, but at least we were able to get,
Yep.
that because I learned my lesson. Because I did a presentation, when was that? I tried to sell the town to go with wood pellet furnace, and I just got shot down. I mean, it was, so I learned my lesson, and that was to go out and, talk and talk. First place to show up, of course, was the fire department, because that's about as conservative as you can get in the town, so.
But yeah, understanding that public education, and it sounds like there's a lot of resources for that, so
yeah.
that's key, is just informing the town. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, the coalition, we can't do that for you, but we can help with, here's some materials from other
Yeah.
towns have used, and here's sort of the templates and the resources.
So I was just gonna ask about that. With us starting down this process, obviously there's the nitty gritty of, legislature and where people are going with that. But the majority of people don't care and don't want to get involved at that level. Is there and so like telling people go sign up for, your newsletter or something, that's not going to help the majority of people. Is there, for example, a newsletter that's like, this is what Community Power is trying to do, and, gives a little piece of it, so like maybe every month or every other month, there's one piece of information that people might like that we can tell them, hey, go sign up for this, or that we can put in our local paper.
Yeah.
Because our local paper's sole
Monthly.
proprietor is sitting right
Yes,
here.
right, yes, and I do
That's
that,
a
I
part
mean,
of the fourth estate,
people still read it too, I hear that all the time, it's the biggest ego trip there ever was, but I've been doing it for 33 years, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do 3 towns, but I started with Webster.
So I used to do a newsletter at Clean Energy New Hampshire, and I write articles here and there for this paper or Green Energy Times or this and that, and I quite enjoy it. But
You still doing it?
no, so there is not currently a coalition newsletter per se. There's a mailing list, and when we need to put information out, we do. But that's an interesting idea. And again, like this coalition is in its infancy. Like literally was birthed 13 days ago.
Well, I didn't know if you had something versus the coalition, because you've been involved with this
Right.
sort of thing much longer than the coalition
I have-
has existed.
I have lists. Yes, I have lists, mailing lists. I don't run a regular column or anything like that. But this is a good idea of how, what are those kinds of infrastructures that need to be developed, or not even they kind of exist, but just need to be instituted through the coalition.
You can always get a byline in my paper, write
Yeah.
articles, little bits to keep it in front of the people's
You give her
minds, because
something
people
that's 2 or
forget.
3 paragraphs each month.
Yeah.
She'll make sure something's going.
So, yeah.
I'd be happy to provide some content if and when it's appropriate to get folks thinking about it.
Yeah, because you have to keep it in front. People forget in a minute, so you have to keep it up, and that's the way it works. Yes,
Absolutely.
I learned that. I used to write for the Monitor before that too, for 11 years. I learned the trade. So,
Yeah. I think that people they do still read the paper. In New
and you
Hampshire,
remember
one way or
it
another.
more. That's what I've read more than once. That there's so much online.
Oh,
You're just bombarded, but when you see it in black and white, you remember it. So,
Yep.
so my advertisers still stick with me. It's free. Everybody gets one. So,
but that's fantastic. I wonder how many towns have something like that.
well, I know 3: Salisbury, Boston, and Webster, because I do it.
Gotcha. So it's across the 3 towns.
Yeah.
No. I
Three
do.
separate
Each town is their own.
Okay.
Because I know people say, why don't you just put it together? No, it's too. Everybody wants like
That
the
would be
Reader's Digest.
too thick, right?
Yeah. Well,
Well,
the thing is that then they don't want to read what's happening in Salisbury or Boston. Sometimes I put like dances or suppers and stuff, but people want like the condensed Reader's Digest
What the
version.
select board's
Right.
doing in the next town over, they don't care about.
Right.
Normally,
It's interesting. It's sort of the coalition, it's trying to bring all these towns together when normally in New Hampshire it seems to be every town is very individualistic, but this is a vehicle that can serve the different needs of the different communities.
So can we join a coalition that's already done, or do we have to do our own type thing?
I imagine this coalition is looking for more members, right?
It is.
Okay.
And again, so there's no cost. The cost is someone has to be appointed to the board, coalition's board, a director and an alternate. So that's the cost, is the time spent.
And what is the expected time spent of that?
So right now, there's a good amount to be done. There's the RFP, getting the legal support set up, and there's a couple of committees that are being established. So yeah, you're looking for board meetings I think are monthly right now, but there would be 2 meetings a month if you have a board meeting, and then the off 2 weeks a committee meeting.
So where does
Roughly.
it meet? In Concord or
So
everywhere?
a quorum has to be present in person, subject to right to know.
So it is all the standard municipal style legislative.
Right.
Darn, no Zooms.
So the quorum. So this is another public advocacy piece. We got to get better virtual meeting access. But a quorum is 4 right now,
Well,
and they're probably going to meet in Lebanon. And,
Okay.
And everyone else can participate virtually.
oh,
Once we have more members, that's another. This dynamics can change.
How is your quorum written? Because normally that's more than half.
It's 25%.
Okay.
25. Oh, that's a good deal.
It's in here somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes that easy. I like that.
Yeah, it's all right here.
Yeah, right. Like on page 36.
Okay, so that's the time sink for, I guess, 2 different people.
And is it
Um,
And only one has to attend, but if that one can't attend, somebody is in their stead.
and is there going to be a cost to the town?
No cost.
Even though there's going to be a lawyer or 2, right? And so no town's going to have to.
So
I mean, obviously, yes, the town will have to have its own attorney looking over it, but for that.
So once the coalition is operating and selling power, everything is paid for through the sale of electricity. For startup, there are expenses. There was a grant from the from Community Development Finance Authority to the City of Lebanon to help pay for some of this. Town of Hanover voluntarily contributed funding, and there's some other grant funding. The legal and many of the service providers are going to enter into at-risk contracts. So this means spending money up front to help get it off the ground, and then to recover all of those costs post-launch when we have a nice healthy cash flow. Because we're going to be selling 500,000 megawatt hours a year in these communities, and we'll have a healthy cash flow, and then we'll pay back the vendors after the fact. That is how the business plan. There's a draft business plan I could share with you. It's harder to read than this thing is.
But anyway, you're still figuring that you're going to end up with cheaper electric power
Yes.
than like
Yes.
Unitil or Eversource.
in large part because they don't have to buy at the single momentary
Right.
point when rates happen to be high.
Exactly.
So what are the sensible ways for us to look at things as far as next steps if it doesn't sound like we can realistically get this on this year's warrant article.
I don't think so.
So what is
Right.
what is the realistic way for us to take action to get this on the next warrant article? And what are kind of the steps that we should do for that?
I think you sort of laid it out. Pitch it at this coming town meeting. When the select board is ready, get plugged into the coalition and find out who's the right person to represent you there to really begin to think, okay, here's how this is all going to work, and plug into those resources. And then if you're headed towards a 2023 town meeting, you've got a lot of time. So I'd say, yeah, I don't know. like immediate next steps, if you're not going to want to go till 2023, I don't know that there's an urgency other than, try to stay in. I can add you to our observers list.
Mhm.
I have all these different lists. I've got the board directors. I've got the big mailing list, and then I've got like observers, which is towns that might want to join soon.
So like you can
It's a
just,
smaller
you can
list.
zoom into,
Yeah, you could observe any of the board meetings if you wanted to.
And you could write a nice monthly or
So I'm not going to write a monthly column for you.
maybe every other month, maybe a little. It could be little, just
well, I think
Every now
Do you
and
want
then.
to? Do you want me to take you on as a client? How much? Maybe we can negotiate.
everybody writes for free for me.
Oh
So-
yeah,
The
I do a
paper's
lot of
free.
writing for free.
So what
I
kind
do a
of,
lot of work for free, actually.
so what kind of are the steps for us though? Whether it's 2013 or 2013, wow. whether it's
So the
the
step
next
is
one or the one after, how does this? What's the
Right.
process go?
join the coalition.
Mhm.
Designate your energy committee as the electric aggregation committee. There's the
I think we did that.
Okay, so you're already good there. So, join the coalition, draft a plan, have public meeting on that plan, or public meeting, public hearing on that plan. I think it actually has to be 2
Mhm.
public meetings or
Okay.
hearings on that plan. Educate the town, go to town meeting. So it's
when you say
So-
join the coalition.
that
So-
means vote of select board to
Oh,
approve this for signature by the chair. I don't know if it'd be your chair of the select board or the town administrator who would be the signatory. But yeah, back here it's got all the signature pages.
Okay.
But sign this and then submit a letter that says here are our appointees, and now you're on the board of directors.
but if we've joined that coalition, that doesn't mean that we would accept, whatever
That
they-
doesn't mean anything other than we
Okay.
have to provide a person to go there
Yep,
and,
right.
and
Okay.
pay attention.
So in other words, we haven't yet said that we would.
So there's the join the coalition and the go to town meeting. They're different, but if you join the coalition, you get all the resources in the plan to go to town meeting. So that's why I say it first. But
Okay.
And then sometime after both, then we're going to implement the plan, and now you get the mailers and is that like a 30 or a 90 day, or when that actually happens, how does the rollout tend to work?
So you approve your plan, and then the Public Utility Commission has 60 days to reject it and to say this does not comply with the law because of X. And if they do nothing over that 60 days, then you're approved. At that point, then it's whenever you say go, whenever you say we have a price in front of us that looks good, we're going to enroll on this date. I think it's like a 30 to 60 day window where you have to do the mailed notifications. I think everyone has to be notified 30 days prior to enrollment.
Okay, so it's 30.
I think so. I have to double check that too. And they get the mailer, and then the next billing cycle, their new bill from Eversource says Webster Community Power.
And how, like when the mailer goes out, for example, I assume that probably the desire would be to say, I want cheapest power or I want completely green power as 2 options. But I know that some are only providing one option, or I don't want to be on this, and some are providing 3 or 4 options.
that's in your
How
plan.
how does that work out as far as where pricing structure and ability come, especially as a small town?
So, being part of the coalition, I think that you would have access to the economy of scale that's getting everybody better pricing and the portfolio management piece. You decide when you develop your plan sort of the guidelines of what are the 3 types of products: the cheapest product, the super green product, or the half green product, something like that. You can't say a specific price in your plan because you don't know what the market's going to be when you enroll everybody. But you can put those guardrails out there. I'm not sure. Maybe you want to repeat the question. I'm not sure I'm following the
Well,
question.
so with the multiple plans, obviously it's easier to bulk purchase if you're not splitting people across different plans and structures. So is it actually beneficial, other than from a PR standpoint, to offer the multiple tiers? Or should it basically be, here's the cheapest we can offer, and this is 100% green?
That's a good question. That's a fair question.
This is for the coalition to decide. Right?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I think you're maybe onto something here. Like, why have like a 40% and a 60%? It's like, do you want green power or do you want cheap power?
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like, yeah, that's a good point.
And so part of this also gets, and you mentioned it just a second ago with pricing. You don't have pricing for this until you're going and purchasing it. When it wasn't this one, and I think we didn't hold it last time, but when we went in person to the local energy conference,
Yeah, we were, right. That was a
there
couple years
were
ago, I guess.
2 or 3 different community aggregate power companies that are like, we've been doing this in Massachusetts and Connecticut and everywhere else, and now New Hampshire says we can do it for you too. And their big pitch was, we can guarantee you greener and cheaper.
Was that their pitch?
Yes.
They were lying to you.
So
Yeah.
I think it was because part of it was, we're building the solar arrays that are going to power this, so they kind of were
So we
able
tried
to
to
double dip with
So
things.
you can get greener and cheaper power. That is very real. You can do that. So I don't mean to say that's not reasonable. But one of the things we did in New Hampshire was we looked at Massachusetts, and it's a very shallow model where they're just buying renewable energy credits. They're not building new solar. So every town has its own broker. The broker goes to supplier, and they buy some green stamps in the marketplace. And that's a shallow version of this.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's other states where we looked at, and they have this coalition approach where they create this new organization, and it's generating revenue, and it's advocating on behalf of its members, and it's signing lots of contracts to put steel in the ground to build new energy projects locally that are benefiting communities. And that's really how we got to this, is to try to replicate that superior model and avoid the Massachusetts model or the broker model that we see down there. That's, you get a headline and you get some green stamped power, but it doesn't change much, actually.
Okay.
And let me ask you just a question. You said that you would have on your bill, it would end up saying, Webster.
Coalition.
Webster Community Power.
Right. I have Unitil, and Unitil does not say on it. You don't happen to get a Unitil bill.
I do
you?
get a Unitil bill.
Really? And does your Unitil bill say who's the supplier?
No, it's whoever Unitil's default is. Yeah, it says delivery charge XYZ, and then it says energy supply.
Yeah, 'cause
Right.
You
Yeah.
did purchase your power already from somebody else,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Right. And
The Unitil bill doesn't say who your competitive
Right.
supplier is.
right.
That's odd.
And it drives me crazy.
Yeah.
Because actually I have to go find out, who my supplier is. But you're saying that your bill does?
I take the Unitil power.
Right. Oh, really?
Hmm.
Huh. Why that? Why not? Obviously you can deal with. I remember. Of course, there's not that many suppliers that you can
Right.
deal with for the PUC, right?
Right.
But I was dealing with one that was coming from Consolidated,
Mhm.
because I happened to see a phone bill for Consolidated, and in it was that saying you could go into 100% green, and so right. It's not Consolidated. That's actually the supplier. There's somebody else.
Right.
But anyway, it drives me crazy that that there's no way for me to see who the supplier is.
Right.
Okay.
So I'm probably going to take off in a minute or two.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
I don't know if there's final questions.
I guess I'll ask the question, of course, we've got our public safety building, which is where we normally get most of our demand charges and stuff. Having higher peak demands, of course, makes it harder to be the brokers and everything else as the coalition. And you mentioned previously that there were different resources available for working on that piece. Is there anything available for us working on that piece either now or once we join, or is none of that going to be available until there's actual power purchasing and sales happening?
Through the coalition, the latter. We don't have it now, and we'll get it later. Right now, you can just maybe call up one of those companies if you wanted to just sort of do that on your own. There's one or two I could point you to, maybe. I don't know if you're interested in that, but
I would be interested in the information.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, but in terms of the coalition having contracts with firms that provide that type of service, that's a little ways out.
Okay.
Yeah. It's going to be a busy fall, winter, spring for the coalition to get everything up and running.
Well, thank you for coming. That was
Is this
nice.
document available online?
It is, and
Yeah,
I emailed it to you, I believe.
Right. Didn't you get the email?
Was this one of the three attachments
Who
you
wants
sent out?
this in the record?
It was, I forwarded his
Perfect.
email to me. That was on Monday.
Okay,
So, look, anyway, if you don't have it, I can get it.
okay.
Does anybody particularly want this hard copy?
Do we need it?
Do you want it?
If it's
I
in,
think
if
should
it's in the
leave it
email,
here.
I'm fine.
I'll
Well,
take
the
it if
town's
no one
not-
wants
The
it.
town's not gonna do anything with it. It's-
No.
not
I
at
just
this
thought
point.
someone might want to
Okay.
read it on paper.
If you try to take it back, I'll take it.
There you go.
Okay.
If either, because you two are the two most likely to want paper to read.
What are they trying to say, Jerry,
I
huh?
have no idea.
Something about a book in your
That
hand
you
that
like
means
hanging
a
on to it
lot.
and flipping the pages.
That's right,
why.
there's something about the book. Right,
I'm a
Jerry?
scroller.
I've spent the past year trying to cure myself from saving every piece of paper that ever comes in my house.
Oh, that's just like me. I always
I'm
do
making some progress.
that.
So do you have anything, either A, anything else for him, or B, anything else you want to talk about? Well, 'cause I think you wanted to talk about the
I have
municipal
other,
as well.
there's nothing, we'll put it off for a month,
Okay.
okay?
Thank you, Henry.
Yep. Good to meet you.
Very much.
Thank you, thank
Yeah.
you very much.
Thank you for coming.
See you soon, and hopefully we'll get you in the coalition when you're
Yeah,
ready.
that would be great.
So,
Yeah.
Do we need to provide you with anything for getting on that observers list?
Yeah.
Yeah, at least put us down as observers, so that even if we don't join right now,
So maybe I can just let's see. Your email address.
I might as well give you first it'll all be on YouTube, so if you're not somebody like me who's giving a town email address, you might want to rethink that. But it's just dhemmenway@webster-nh.gov.
HEMMING
HEMENWAY
WAY at
webster-nh.gov.
DHEMENWAY at webster-nh.gov.
Yep.
And do you also want to be added or not? I'll put you on.
sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, Marty would definitely make sense as the chair.
Dave, do you have a key for the next door? I'll give him one of my newspapers. Do you have a key for Russ's,
That's a good question.
or the town, or the the town clerk?
I'm not sure if I still may not have any keys other than this room. and
I
the
know
main
I don't
door.
have any keys, so.
But let me check. I might have gotten one to Dana's office. And we can give over.
Good to see y'all. Good to meet you.
So I'll give you a
Hey,
news,
likewise.
if you can get in, I'll give you a newspaper, so then you know what I do, so then you can maybe.
Oh, you have one?
Yeah, they're in here, I'm just trying to find them. Oh, good.